What's up, my friends? How's it going today? Get comfy here, make a video. It's been a couple days since I made a video, and although I used to make them pretty much daily, there are times when I go through a few days without really making any, and it got me thinking, the other day, we had an appraisal done on our house, so the last few days have been chaos around here, trying to get everything finished and ready, just so it looks presentable, or try to maximize the value of it anyway. And so during the last few days, I've had a lot of ideas that I've been thinking about while I'm working and painting, and thinking, oh, I want to make a video about this. And then it's like by the time I get out there, grab the camera and think about it, I'm like, I've lost interest, And I think that's kind of goes along with a lot of things in my life, that I kind of take, I don't know, it's the one day at a time approach as far as what I'm interested in, because trying to consolidate and define what's interesting to me is very difficult. And then half the time I start talking like this and rambling on for the first couple minutes about rambling on, or about, exactly what I'm talking about, kind of not having a subject, so to speak. I have several ideas of things I want to talk about, and I feel like a lot of them go nowhere. Politically, I have a ton of things that I would like to talk about, and it's not for lack of, I should say, it's not for fear of confrontation or fear of argument, because I very much welcome a good argument, because I don't look at an argument as something like our parents taught us not to argue, but rather something that philosophers created, the idea that I shouldn't say created, but rather it was one of the root core values of a philosopher, is to know how to properly argue in order to where both sides learn something. Even if one person's right and the other is wrong, at least you can learn what moves people to believe things that are wrong. For example, let's say you're arguing something that you know is true and another person is completely deluded. The fact that that person is arguing, even if they are deluded, means that they must have something or reason to believe what they believe. And this is very prominent in religion, because religion is something that, another thing that a lot of people just don't even find it worthy to discuss. Politics and religion is that old joke. People say you just don't talk about two things in the workplace, politics and religion. And there are a few others, but mostly those are the two. Politically, there's just so much shit going on right now in the world, not just in this nation. I mean, sure, if I've ever, I've always said I don't hate anyone. Using that word, it's a very strong word. And it's impactful. I actually have it tattooed on my knuckles since I was 14 years old, because I was a punk-ass kid and I thought it'd be cool to tattoo hate on my knuckles. And years later, people, why don't you get that removed? Why don't you get that removed? And I've always said the same thing, because it reminds me of a time when I was pissed off. And I wouldn't say that I was really an angry, hostile. I was never a hostile person. I was never a violent person. But during the time when that had happened, something had happened to me that had set me down that road of frustration. And around that time, my father had passed away from cancer. So when you're 14 or 15 and your dad dies, you have a little bit of anger. And perhaps hate wasn't the best choice of words, but it defined the strongest word I knew at the time. Maybe I just hate things that, maybe it's not people, but rather ideas or subjects. But of course, as an adult, I don't hate anyone and I don't hate anything. But I guess what I was leading to in that is, if there was any person in this world that, a type of person that I could hate, it would be someone like Donald Trump. But I still can't find myself hating him. This is a guy whose father raised him to be all about business. The guy is completely delusional. The guy is a menace. He is, he's just out there. I won't go into the details, but I'm only using that to define the rest of my discussion about politics here, which is to say that if people think Trump is bad, you need to really look at the cabinet around him and the decisions that these people are making. But then you extend that outside of our borders to the rest of the world. I mean, we have governments that are, killing off their own citizens, journalists, that are imprisoning dissidents and people who want to speak out for the rights of other people. And then these people who put their lives on the lines in our country, or let's say in another country, if you have a liberal mindset in a lot of countries and you try to speak out against the government, you'll just disappear. In our nation, the government here doesn't have to do anything to liberals because they just sick Americans on each other. And all of a sudden, being liberal-minded has become a bad word. And what's happening is, between politics and religion, I've seen that people want to lean to one side or another. You're either with us or you're against us. When people say, are you conservative or liberal? I'm like, I'm a human being with my own ideas. I don't define myself. But, of course, if I were to lay out and define all the values that I find important, then people would categorize me in one group or another. But I have understanding on both sides. Yes, I know that a healthier nation, for example, with healthcare, helps the whole nation. In other words, even if you're throwing billions of dollars at helping American citizens who can't help themselves, in the long run, that's beneficial. It ends up being more profitable for the country to take care of its citizens, because if one generation is healthier, their children can be healthier, and this is something that's continued on down the line, but nobody wants to see people healthy and happy. They just want to make profits. And so we've ended up in this world right now where greed is a motivator. And people are willing to sacrifice others' lives in order to make more money. A perfect example of this is recently there was that pharmacist, a guy who bought a drug company, or bought a drug anyway, the legal rights to it. And it was a necessary, I think it was a cancer medication, or it had something to do with, a disease or an ailment which people die from. I can't remember what it was. And as soon as he bought this company, he marked up the medicine 5,000%. So he marked it up 50 times more than it was, to where it was $750 per pill. It was national news a year or two ago. This same guy's actually on trial right now for a completely separate charge, but this is a person who decided, I'm going to take a medicine that people need to live, and I'm not just going to mark it up double or even triple, but 50 times. And the kind of greed that a person must have to know that people will die not being able to afford that, but just being able to line your pockets more. It shows that there are people out there, a lot of them, a lot of sociopaths and psychopaths, and just people who never learned any better, that really will stomp your face into the dirt and take your wallet, metaphorically or literally. Because it's funny that, in America we're so focused on the crime of the citizens. So look at this crime, and people say, look at what shoplifting is doing to the prices of this, and look at how this is black on black crime and white on white crime, and trying to define it by color, by gender, sex, race, whatever. It's all just a distraction from the people who are really taking the lives, the people who force people into these situations, like the CIA bringing crack into Freeway Rick Ross in the 80s in LA. The CIA was known to be an importer of cocaine. They were known to be promoting crack in a way. You can look it up yourself, but this isn't anything new. This has just been like the same with, giving opium to the Chinese, or, amphetamines into the inner city. The idea is to fill the prisons up. And it sounds completely like, a person may say that's ridiculous, but it's not at all. The prison industry has become, America has the most prisoners by far, more than any other country, even countries with more than our population. So we have a serious issue to contend with. The private prison industry has become too big for its britches. We have so many problems already. We have so many problems in society that are caused by crime, drugs, and poverty. And then throwing a person in prison for one small crime they did, this only serves to cause them more problems when they get out. Reassimilation into public. I read one story the other day about a judge who was they found out that he was being given money on the side, bribes, by the local private prison system, which was actually just for juveniles, and he was being paid to send more people to the juvenile detention center. In other words, he sent like a 13-year-old there for stealing nutmeg from the grocery store, I think, a couple other things like that. And in the long run, these kids end up spending a whole bunch of time behind bars as fucking teenagers. And the kind of people you meet in jail and in juvie, you know, if you're not a criminal element, if you're not the kind of person who does things like that, I mean, you get caught, let's say shoplifting once, and you go to jail for it, and let's say they want to make an example of you. If you spend 6 months locked up behind bars with people who, you know, are criminals, you're going to be inspired to be a criminal too. Once you're looked upon as something, you tend to fit that role. So, I could go on and on about politics, and I really don't want to. It's just, I had to mention, you know, just how fucked up this system is, and how I really see that, you know, eventually it's all going to fall apart. I know that. Mankind was never meant to govern ourselves in large groups like this. We make horrible decisions that can harm millions, if not billions, of people. And when one individual can make a decision that affects millions, I say there's something wrong. Absolutely wrong. I've never met one person, one human in my life who I believe 100% is coherent and functional and can make all the right decisions. We make errors. We fuck up. For all the people who are out there talking about, like, the healthcare bill right now, what's going on here, and hearing people say, well, the Democrats won't even sign on this new bill to get rid of Obamacare, and then you find out that actually the Democrats weren't even allowed in to check over the bill. The ACA, what they call Obamacare, they spent a year getting it ready before they presented it, and this one they're trying to throw out in a month to look good. But here's what's happening, and I just wanted to mention this. For 22 million people who will lose Medicaid through the expansion project over the next 10 years, I had to do a little math to really wrap my head around what 22 million people look like. And I think most of us kind of lose ourselves in the numbers. If there were a group of people standing with 2 feet of space, each person, let's say, standing in a standard line like you would be standing in for waiting in line for something, and you were to take 22 million people and put them in line, it would extend all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, and then back again, and then back again, and then almost all the way back again. It almost crossed the U.S. 4 times if you had 22 million people standing in line. That is an amazingly huge fucking number of people that are going to lose health coverage. And I really just wanted to put it into that perspective. So, one second. My house is full of noise, so I gotta tell people to shut up when I want to make a video, even though it doesn't work. So, off from my political ramble, which really didn't convey anything, of course, that I really wanted to convey, was just the idea that we have too many people making decisions for others. And I find it's very offensive, but what do you do, And I also, always think that this country, our country, the U.S. anyhow, was founded on the principles of escaping from religious persecution and government persecution. And so we founded this place on the idea that, the forefathers, and I won't even get into the details about the original intentions, but that if it was so important that they include a separation of church and state, then it must have been something that they realized was a threat. But, over 200 years later, and we're in the same situation we were in, only things have got worse, not better. separation of church and state is slowly losing hold. We have a school the other day that it's a Christian school that they took this case to court, I guess, and they got approved to get federal funding for a playground at a Christian school. And I think it was a Christian or Catholic school. Anyhow, it's like it's an unprecedented case where a school, a religious institution is getting money, your tax dollars. And it's almost ludicrous that at a time when religion is on the decline, that those who remain religious, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, are trying so desperately to hang on to that, to prove that's right. And I'm not a person who thinks that no one should believe in God. I'm not religious myself. I do believe in a universal consciousness or mind, but I don't want to get into the details of that. The point is that whatever I believe, I don't try to define it by telling other people what they should be believing. And that's the problem with Christianity in my eyes. And in Arkansas yesterday, they erected a 6-foot tall, by I think 3.5 feet wide, plaque of the Ten Commandments, a giant 18,000 pound stone slab that was all carved with the Ten Commandments. And they put this up basically under the cover of night, metaphorically. Like, they had to sign a state bill, they had to pass a law, legislation that allowed them to put that on state property. It's sitting in front of the Capitol building there, the state capitol, I guess. And it's not the first time. This happened in Georgia, and when it happened, I think it was Georgia, or Oklahoma actually, and a guy drove his car into it and crashed it. Well, this stone monument was up for less than 24 hours, and the same guy drove down there and drove his car into it. He actually, they showed pictures of it, crashed all over the street, and I couldn't help but just laugh inside. I thought, this guy, even though people are saying that's destruction of property, that's vandalism, I say no, it's not vandalism. These are people who went around our federal rights in order to establish a precedence for an approved religion of their state. When you're putting one religion, one religious symbol in front of the state capitol, that says all you need to say. It says that we are a Christian, state. And a lot of people really believe this is a Christian nation. That's just not the case. This is a nation of people. And as things change over time, people are going to be hanging on more desperately to what they want to believe. See, I have nothing wrong with a person who believes in their God and they go to church and they do whatever they do. However you worship is completely your choice. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the minute it influences other people's lives or makes them feel marginalized, then that would be a difficult one. In fact, the Satanic Church over there, as much as I think they're just complete morons, they wanted to erect a statue of Baphomet, like, this demon with these two children smiling up at him. And it was kind of their response to them wanting to put in this religious stuff. So the state went back and they passed a new bill not allowing this, certain things, and then kind of retroacted it to say, no, you can't do this. And not that I think that there should be a satanic, I think that that's just moronic. But the point is that it's preferential treatment for those who believe in one thing over another. And in my opinion, I think preferential treatment for beliefs in general should be abolished completely. There have been times when I say people can believe what they like, and it's up to them, and so be it. But beliefs affect actions, and actions affect people. There have been... I can't even begin to guess the amount of people that have been killed over religious differences or ideals. The amount of people who have been hanged, shot, stabbed, tortured, crusaded. And it all led up to today, where we have extreme Islam terrorism in these areas of, there are, I think, a couple billion Muslims, and of course there's going to be terrorists within there because they feel oppressed and marginalized. But it's really no different from the Crusades. If during the Crusades they had rocket launchers and hand grenades, they would have used them. It's just a matter of what you have in access to yourself. But taking boats over to other countries and forcing them, to believe something, this is still happening. There are still Christian missionary groups telling others what to believe, although they're not forcing it through violence or torture. There's a couple different ways to look at it. Some of them just want to pass the word of God on to others because they believe that their belief in their religion has brought them happiness, and they want to share that with other people because they really believe that other people will only be saved if they believe in Jesus. To me, I just find that I don't even have a word for it. It's not something that I've just thought about lightly. It's something that I've sat and pondered for a long time. I've had several very long, detailed, drawn-out discussions with people, some over several months, about religion, whether or not God exists, or whether or not Jesus is the only path. And pretty much I've come down, by the end of the discussions, I come down to the same thing, the same realization that the only real significant difference between believing nothing and believing what they believe is that they think I'm going to hell to burn in eternal hellfire because I haven't taken Jesus as my one Savior. When, to me, it just seems so obvious that Jesus was a metaphor for, and I'm not saying he wasn't a real person, but rather that he was saying, walk these footsteps, live this way, not live worshiping me. It was Jesus himself that, so many of these prophets have talked about idol worship as being a poor way to go about it, and that, it's almost a sin in a lot of cultures and a lot of, sects to use any type of idols for worship. And that would include a cross on a chain, that would include a picture of Jesus on a cross on a chain especially. But what I'm getting at, not to try to insult anyone, because I'm sure there's somebody out there who's Christian, probably a few people. It's a matter of realizing that I have a lot of interesting beliefs of my own, but I would never ever push that down somebody's throat or try to force them to believe it, nor would I try to define it as something that's the only one truth. That's the difference. If I believe something, I can say, well, you believe this? Cool. Maybe we both have a little bit of the picture. But there's not a single Christian that I've met that can admit that maybe Jesus is not the only path to salvation. I haven't met one Christian out there who would just say, maybe there's a potential that Jesus meant to live like him, not through him. But not to attack Christianity, it's just what I'm most exposed to. I find Judaism to be very interesting. I have the Kabbalah, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, I've heard it different ways, and a couple of other, texts on Judaism and gematria, numerology, things like that is fascinating when you look at the map and the shapes and the architecture of how it was founded. But when you get these guys in these hats and these funky curls and they feel like they have to dress up a certain way to look like a Jew, they've completely missed the point. Likewise, if you want to get into Islam, the Muslims, people wearing turbans, in the West, we see this as so offensive that women have to wear these burqas over their face. And you talk to women over there, and some of them say, yes, they agree it's ridiculous. Others say they like it. And others say they don't know any different because it's all they've ever known. And that's what I really wanted to get to, is the idea that when we've grown up believing a certain thing, we think that's just the way it is, and that's what God wants. That's what, life's about. If our parents taught us something and we don't learn to teach ourselves any better, we're following the footsteps of everyone who came before us because it's easier. There are a couple different ways to start a business. You can either go out and take a safe business that is buying and reselling a certain, type of scissors or whatever it might be, something that that will be consistent. Or you can go out and take a chance. If you take a chance, you might be wrong, you might screw up, your business might go under. With religion, it's often the same way. It's safe to believe what other people believe because you will always have somebody to say, yes, you're right, you're still on the right path, just keep the faith. It seems like I hear that a lot with you just got to stick with it, like it's some kind of a lesson that you're going to reach an end of and be like, okay, now I understand God. And from the conversations I've had, since I can't live in anyone else's head, all I know is that most of the people I've talked to regarding religion aren't so sure of themselves by the way that they present their arguments. And they get very offensive, they get vile, they start insulting me. If, like, let's say I respect your beliefs, but I don't believe it. I've been called every name in the book, and more often by Christians, supposedly, than anyone else. And this is probably why I bring it up. I've tried to be civil. I never say, oh, your religion's bullshit, you're an idiot. You know, I'm always collected about it and try to explain my point. And by the end, they're just drooling idiots calling me names. I've had a few arguments with people regarding Islam as well, like say on YouTube, but there's not that many on there, you know, that confront me and say, oh, this is the only way, Allah's the way. It's just kind of easy to blow it off like anything else. I guess, you know, I could go through, I think there's something like 3,000 religions in the world. Is that right? It's not even worth trying to, you know, go through them. I was attracted to Hinduism for a while because I found it fascinating. I understood that it's all architecture or archetypes and metaphors, you know, like so much of religion is. But the difference is it seems that Christianity has forgot the archetypes, that they've forgot what metaphors even are. Everything has to be literal. But with, say, Buddhism, it's not even a religion. It's more of a way of life, but some people take it to extreme places. So for me, I say I follow like a Buddhist mentality, I guess, if in some ways. That I think the biggest way is always remembering balance. That life is balance. There's ups and there's downs, and anytime you're at a low, just remember you'll be all right later. And when you're at your highest, learn to embrace it, not to say, oh well, I'm going to feel shitty later, darn it. You know, just be where you're at, and to just be. But so there are people who live with just say, oh yeah, I kind of like a Buddhist, and then there's people who say, oh, I'm a hardcore Buddhist. You know, I'm fully vegan. I wear a robe. I live in a monastery. That's just all trivial shit to me. It means nothing. I mean, there is no way of life that every human being can live which will suit everyone. And that's important to remember. This is political, religious, and otherwise. The idea that as long as we think that others should think our way, we are wrong too. It's a matter of looking and weighing all the options and saying which mentalities are causing the most damage. You know, like when it comes to politics, you know, who's doing the most damage to us as a society, to the environment? Is it liberals? Is it conservatives? Is it right wing? Is it left wing? Is it men or women? Is it blacks, whites, Mexicans, Asians? It's always about pointing the finger at somebody else, but it's very difficult for us to say that we're all part of the solution and part of the problem at the same time. And we're all learning from one another. And, yeah. End of ramble. I'm getting back into the videos, so I figured I'd just make a little ramble video there. Hope I didn't offend anyone with the religious aspect, but if you were offended by that, then I guess maybe it would be good to look within and ask yourself why. I've never felt offended that somebody didn't believe what I believe. That I can remember. I've been more annoyed, if anything, when people can't have a conversation and say, that might be true. There is a possibility. But, alas, we may never know. We're just people. Human beings. Hairless apes with clothing on. And a language. Talk to y'all later.